And a scary one is that the majority of young Australians are provided the alcohol by their parents.
Sure.
And
that's where the old thing, so, well, if you're going to drink, I'd rather you drink at home. Then you can bring your friends around and have a party here.
Yeah.
But again, see, that's what's happening in the world, because a lot of times they don't know, they're just lost. Yeah. We have a God that can actually show us, and you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think also alcohol, especially for guys, is kind of like becoming an adult thing. So
I'm a man now.
Yeah, like if anyone's heard much of Peter Janetsky, he talks a lot about initiation ceremonies, how all through history and every culture has an initiation ceremony for their boys to become men. But the Western culture's just completely ditched that. We've got nothing for our boys to say.
We have schoolies.
Yeah.
That's our initiation ceremony of finishing school, going and getting wasted.
Yeah.
I remember in the Real Men's Conference, that guy said, there's many mates but not many friends, you see, because a mate will say, oh, you got plastered last night. Awesome, man. Oh, you went with that girl last night. Fantastic. Yahoo! That's a mate, because they don't care. But a friend will actually pull you aside and say, hey, look out. You're going down, you know? And we need more friends, don't we?
Yeah, definitely.
So what's the most statistics? You've got something here. I read you have 80% of all alcohol consumed by 14 to 7-year-old is drunk at the risk of high levels. That's 80%.
Yeah, so drinking to get drunk.
Yeah, I think that's the problem with alcohol, is that not that alcohol is evil and stuff like this. So at church, I think you've said having a glass of wine with dinner isn't a horrible thing. It's not the Antichrist kind of thing. But for our youth and for our youth leaders, I think what we see is that it's one of the biggest problem with our youth is that it's in excess. So
it's the other thing too. So you can have your glass of wine at night with your meal, but who's watching you?
Yeah.
This is what's important. And what do your kids think about that? Have you discussed things with your kids first? And you know what I mean? Like they can say, oh, my mum and dad, they have a drink at home, so it's okay. But they don't realise there's a boundary, there's consequence. You know what I mean? Unless you really sit and chat with people, even friends, whatever. You know what I mean? So they're very responsible.
Yeah, and as with any addiction that you'll see as we go through some of the other stuff that teens face, there's some people that can have a glass of beer and stop at that. Yeah. And there's some people that get that taste and they need more and more and more. And just with teenagers' brains that are still developing, alcohol is not what they need to stunt its growth. Yeah. I just think that teenagers drinking is illegal for starters, and just not needed.
So you've got here 60 young people are hospitalised each week in Australia because they drink alcohol. 60 people. That's amazing. So what about drugs? How does drugs fit into all this? You've got your alcohol.
Drugs is like another experimental thing. Another, proving that you're not a kid anymore if you have drugs as well. It can play that part. But there's obviously massive big risks. We've got a PowerPoint. Nick, do you want to chuck that PowerPoint up? It might have some statistics on the drugs. 1 in 3 of all Australian aged 14 and over have tried cannabis, that's marijuana or pot, at some point in their life. So that's 1 in 3 teenagers. So, that's a lot of people having a go of this stuff. So these are things, we're not trying to scare all you guys with these statistics and stuff. They're a little bit freaky, but we just want us as a church to be aware of what's going on, and you guys that are parents to be aware of what's going on, so that you can discuss some of this stuff with your kids. Because, obviously, like we said, you can't shelter them forever from it. Their kids at a Christian school are going to be going through this and experimenting with some of this. So your kids need to know that you care about them enough to talk about this with them, I think.
So what's some of the statistics you were going to say? You go 1/3 of Australians.
Yeah,
you've heard all that.
12 to 15-year-olds, 2.7% reported using cannabis in the previous 12 months, compared with 15% of 16 and 17-year-olds and 19% of 18 and 19-year-olds.
And people need to be aware, even the parents now, that the marijuana and things like that from the old days when we were brought up is so much stronger now. I remember I used to go through like a 4-finger bag of dope every day. Yeah. But today, if you had that, you would be you'd be in trouble, probably in hospital, because it's so strong, yeah? And I think we need to be aware of that as well. It's so different. Oh, they're just having a smoke. No, they're not. This is so... Because of the toxins that are in it these days and the chemicals, they're doing a lot of...
Yep, and direct link to mental illness with like schizophrenia and stuff like that. Like dope has a really high connection between... Yeah.
So let's move on from there. So, okay, so kids are taking drugs we've got to be careful of. Okay, understand... We'll talk about some of the things, you know, the things we've got to look out for, you know, that we see mood changes or do whatever. Because these kids can really hide stuff too, you know. Hey, you know, like these parties and that, you know, I'm going to such and such. Well, do you know where your kids really are, you know?
Yeah. So there's definitely signs that while they can sometimes be subtle, it's going to come out somewhere. And so we got taught this thing in uni, and it's looking at a whole person's being. And being stands for their physical body, their emotions, their intellect, their neighbours, so their social situation, and God, their spiritual.
Wow.
So when something's going on, you have to look at a whole person's being, and it's going to come out in one of those areas. So
what's a B again? B is what?
Your body, your physical...
Yeah, so what they're looking like if they...
Yep. Yeah, emotions, so emotionally, how are they doing? Intellectual, so your cognitive thought and process and stuff like that. Your neighbour, so your social,
your friends are like.
Yep. Do you go out? Do you keep isolated? And God, your spiritual life.
That's great. Very good.
And so it's going to show in some aspect there. Like so, their schoolwork might drop, or their friends have changed, or they've suddenly got this really stink attitude when they never had it before. There's lots of different signs.
That's good. So let's talk about self-harm and suicide. Self-harm. I mean, when I was younger, I never saw a lot of that. Yeah. It's like it's just becoming a popular thing. Yeah. It's weird. Why is that? What's that about?
Yeah, self-harm's really come in really rapidly this last few years. I'm not exactly sure what's led to it, but like self-harm is... I don't know, something that we can get a weird kind of perspective about in our heads and stuff as being real demonic and crazy and real satanic and stuff. But for a lot of kids that do it, and there is a lot of kids that do struggle with this issue now, it's really a coping mechanism of dealing with the hurt they're feeling on the inside, the insecurity that they're feeling. Rachel can probably talk into it more. But
yeah, because Rachel, you've experienced this. I don't know, you don't mind me telling people, but you've experienced this self-harm yourself because of reasons. Just tell us why and how did you get through it, and what can help us to understand that? You know,
I think that I know I used to get so frustrated when people would be like, "She's doing it for attention," and looking back on it now, I was doing it for attention. I wanted people to notice that I was not doing okay.
Right.
So I think self-harm is a cry for attention, but not a cry for attention that needs to be dismissed and being like, "Oh, they're just attention seeking. Just leave them alone."
But you had to be ready to hear that. When you're going through it, you weren't ready. You made you angrier, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. But we need to realise that it's a cry for attention. Something's going on and they need help. It's like a stop warning sign. And it's a massive problem in the schools and in young people today. And definitely 150 to 360,000 students nationwide engage in self-harming behaviour regularly, on a regular basis.
My goodness. What sort of self-harm are you talking? Burning yourself, cutting yourself? What do they do?
So there's burning, cutting, biting, scratching, head banging, bone breaking. The list is endless.
So you're watching for things. They normally cover them up, I suppose. Do them on parts you can't see. How would you know?
So I know a big thing for me was I used to wear jumpers all the time in summer. That's a really obvious thing.
Okay.
Always wearing long sleeves. Yeah. What else?
I think too, if you notice someone that you think self-harming, or you have a kid that you think might be self-harming, or a friend or something, probably shock isn't the best way to respond to it. So be like, "Whoa, what have you done?"
Go to your room.
Freak out, identify it definitely and say, "That doesn't look good, that cut on your arm. Let's talk about it." And communication, like you said before, is huge thing.
And knowing that self-harm is not suicide. There's a big difference between self-harm and suicide. So someone that's self-harming doesn't mean that they're suicidal.
I think it's important that too, is with communication, that you can't just wait until you see a cut and then think you're going to sit down and have a heart-to-heart. Yeah. because you've got to have a relationship at the beginning, and that's why it's important for us as parents to have that communication and have the love right through. Do you think? Because if I parent and I have a relationship, I say, "What you doing?" You know, you say, "Oh, go away," you know, and that's where you find it of others. Do you? Yeah. How
and
does that
another
happen?
thing in that is knowing that, sorry parents, your kids won't always want to talk to you about that stuff. Let them have like strong and good mentors and accountability people in their life, like chaplains and like youth leaders and family friends and stuff, because it's again that identity stage of them separating from their family, finding out who they are. So they're not always gonna want to come to you. Like if you have a great relationship with your youth, that's amazing. But sometimes there'll be a period of time where they're not gonna want to come to you, and they will come back.
I suppose that's where we as Christians can fall to our knees and say, Lord, you know, because he sees everything, and really just cover them.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and that's crazy too, because I know, just coming out of being a teenager, that parents are awesome. So don't worry, parents, your teenager will realise that you are awesome. You're the best thing that's ever happened to them.
Yeah.
But as being a teenager, you think, oh, mum and dad, they don't know anything.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and you think you know everything when you're a teenager.
That's all right, mate. You got a couple more years till you're 27, then it just clicks again. No joking.
Yeah, I get this too.
Okay, so suicide, you said that not all cutting suicidal doesn't mean they're going to suicide. Let's talk about suicide a bit in youth and that.
So Australian teen, especially in the Indigenous societies, has got one of the highest rates of suicide in the world, which is really scary. Like, we live in a broken nation. Like, we live in an awesome country, an awesome, blessed country, but there's a lot of brokenness that surrounds us. So just a stat for you, it's estimated that in 2007 alone, 69 males aged 15 to 19 years and 27 females aged 15 to 19 years committed suicide. And that's in Australia. So you can see it's a lot higher in men than in guys than in females. And females often try it, like attempted suicide is higher, but the actual success of suicide is higher in boys than in females.
I would say I wouldn't be surprised if that's higher too, because a lot of it goes unreported, because I know there's a lot of train accidents. We've got a couple of drivers and things, people in here, and you know, there's accidents where people throw themselves in front of trains, and a lot of times they're teenagers and stuff, and you don't hear about it on the news, so they don't want to spread it, obviously, but it's happening out there. It's amazing, you know, when you hear things. Yeah. So what about sex? Let's get into sex and talk about that. It's a big one for youth these days, especially with the culture and the change that sex is okay outside of marriage. It's all right to get involved. It's all right to lose your virginity. You're the one out if you haven't. Talk us through some of that stuff.
Yeah, I think it's really hard because, again, there's different expectations on guys and girls. Like, if a guy sleeps around a lot, he's awesome, he's a player, he's the man. If a girl sleeps around a lot, well, she's a skank, and she's nothing, she's worthless, she's used.
But on the other hand, if she doesn't, she's frigid.
So there's really no in between. So it's the pressures on young people is insane to have sex and to be involved in all this stuff.
I remember a movie or something, someone said that the girl who was a virgin said to the people, you know, I can always be what you are, but you can never become me again if they're a virgin. And I think that's a good comment for young ones to make to their friends. I could any day I could be like you, but you can never be like me again, right? It might just shut them up a little bit, because, you know, it's this pressure,
And I know from my experience, I used to actually get a lot of respect from guys in high school. There was some guys that would sing to me the song, Look at Me, She's Rachel C, you know, from Greece, like Sandra D. But I would actually get respect from...
Did they sing it to you?
I would actually get respect from guys because I wouldn't put myself to that level. And so there is respect out there, but just the pressures are enormous and phenomenal.
Yeah.
I can't say the word.
That's great. It's good. So, okay, let's talk about sex in general, a few topics. Pornography, big amongst youth, isn't it? It's not even just youth, but adults as well. Yeah. So tell us some stuff on pornography, and what do you think is happening within the youth in that area, young